Welcome to the Big Play Podcast with Dr. Marlon Williams. I'm your host, Dr. Marlon Williams, and today we have a very special guest, the one and only Chris Sharp, photographer extraordinaire and Southwest DeKalb alumni photographer. What's going on, Chris? How you doing, sir?
Hey, what's up, Marlon? Good to be here.
Yes, sir. Glad to have you. Honored to have you. Won't you start off by telling us your time, at Southwest DeKalb, and we'll get into how you became the photographer of the mighty Southwest DeKalb Panthers.
I was a student there, class 84, so was there from 79 to 84. And to put it briefly, we'll probably touch on it more later. I was there to witness basically the transition from Southwest DeKalb being an all-white high school or majority white high school to majority black high school, and saw all the aches and pains that have gone through a process such as that. Like I said, I saw a lot of things and have a lot of stories to tell, I guess you could say.
Indeed. And hopefully we'll be able to get to all of them today, or at least some of them. So, 79.
Yes, I'm old.
Yeah.
It's hard to believe. 46 years ago. That's crazy.
That's fantastic. It seems like, Chris, the older we get, the quicker the years go by.
It really seems like that. Yes. Time does fly.
So, I moved to Southwest DeKalb. I moved to Decatur in 1984 from Brooklyn, New York, and that was a culture shock.
Absolutely.
And it was definitely extremely different. There weren't as many people here at the time. But I will say, Chris, that one of the things that I noticed immediately, coming from New York, a long time ago, they used to call it the melting pot. And then when people became culturally competent and recognized that a melting pot means people lose their identities and who they are, it's a salad bowl of sorts. But, I came here and it just seemed like it was only black and white. And at Rainbow Elementary at the time, it was predominantly black. And, but, speak on what you observed between 79 and 84, because I did see some changes as well beyond 84, but I imagine that you were there for the majority of it.
Yeah, it actually kind of rewinds us a little bit back to 77.
Okay. That's
when they started the MDM program, and it was designed to basically, because the belief was, and probably some truth to it, that the inner city schools, like the schools that the closer you got city were, more majority black, weren't getting quite the education that the predominantly white schools were getting.
Okay.
So they offered the MDM program. So basically, wherever your race was a minority, or if you're a majority at your school, you could transfer to a school where your race was a minority. Well, the only thing that happened was a lot of black students started going to the white schools. And so basically, western part of DeKalb, closer to the city of Atlanta, was majority black, but everybody started coming to the east side and the south side, which were at the time predominantly white.
Okay.
So what happened was that parents didn't want their kids being bused across town, so said, you know what, let's just move into the school district. Well, a lot of white people had a problem with that. And I still remember in our neighborhood, had a black family move in, and honestly, within 6 months, half the neighborhood went up for sale.
Oh, wow.
Because the belief was that if a black family moved neighborhood, property values would go down, and it kind of became a self-fulfilling prophecy because everybody put their house up for sale. Now the market's saturated, nobody's buying because the only people want to move. No white family is going to move to the neighborhood now because there's a black family. So, so another black family move in, more houses go up for sale. So, and honestly, within 2 years, my neighborhood went from being 100% white. And this is in South DeKalb, right behind Bob Mathis.
Okay.
We moved there in 75, 100% white. By 79, our neighborhood was probably 50, 60% black. And the only people that didn't move out are people who couldn't afford or couldn't sell. Go ahead.
So when you say behind Bob Mathis, that's off of Boring Road.
Correct.
And you know, it's interesting what you said about people having concerns about the values of their homes going down. Uh, Unfortunately, the reality is that the values are, you know, can sometimes be impacted by Black families moving in, but not because Black families are necessarily bringing negative behaviors or activity. There have been studies and research and news stories about uh, home appraisers giving significantly lower appraisal
Oh
values
yeah,
to homes if they're owned by Black families versus white families.
that
And
is true.
I mean, a personal story, I've even had a friend who was seeking to get his home appraised. And I told him, I said, if you can get someone white in there to show the appraiser around, that might make a difference in the value of your home. And so, you know, like you mentioned, the
Yeah,
self-fulfilling prophecy,
prob-
but also,
right.
you know, just the reality of how things were at the time. That's unfortunate. But go ahead. Sorry about that.
Yeah, and so what ended up happening was that people couldn't sell, so then they allowed
Mm.
Section 8 into the neighborhoods,
Oh, wow.
which brought in some criminal element, not even criminal, but I mean, but they're higher propensity of crime. So it kind of, and especially not so much in the house, but a lot of the apartments close
Hmm.
by,
Hmm.
you saw that, and so the crime rate went up, and that's kind of where the stereotype is that Black people bring crime. Well, no, it was the laws that they put in place to because white people couldn't sell their houses, and
Mm.
so
Mm.
so they allowed certain things to happen, and so but yeah, so it was a challenging time because no, I didn't have I'm from the North, and I was always raised not to judge people. I learned
Hmm.
about Martin Luther King when I was little from my parents, um, and so I didn't have a problem with it. But
Right.
just to kind of even go back further, when I moved there in '75, most of the white kids in the neighborhood had no problem using the N word, and it
Okay.
was. I mean, they said it just like they said it was routine to say it, and so
Hmm.
I mean, I never used the word, but it always just struck me as odd that they just would constantly just use that word, and so. And they were the first ones, of course, to move out. They moved out to Conyers, out to Gwinnett.
Right.
So it was a change. So, like I say, sixth grade is when everything kind of changed. So,
Mm.
but when I got to high school, Southwest DeKalb, it was like 80. Southwest DeKalb was like 80% white. So so I saw my yearbook. You look at this class of 80. That's the first full year. It was like 90% white. And when I
Mm.
graduated in '84, we were like 85% Black. And so
Mm.
there was challenges. Like I remember, I think it was '82 or '83, we elected our first Black homecoming queen, Lane
Mm.
Love, and people. I think that's who it was, but people lost their minds. I mean, they set fire to the lawnmowers. They over by the I can't remember where on the football field, spray painted the school, and it was a
Wow.
good time. Yeah,
Wow.
I,
And you said that was 82?
I think it was '82
Okay.
82 or '83 when she won homecoming queen.
Wow.
Yeah, and so it was a challenge.
Yeah.
And then we had Monica Kaufman come out there and speak, and she got onto white people for segregating themselves, and everybody booed her, and it was, I mean, she got really irritated with that. So
Wow.
yeah, and then there was fights at school too, and jokes about whites versus blacks and stuff. And I mean, there really were jokes, but there was a lot of tension. Yeah.
Mm. Mm.
Uh,
You know, when I first moved to Decatur in '84, one of the reasons we moved to Decatur was because of a church, Chapel Hill Harvester Church.
oh yes, yes.
And their symbol, they had these license plates where it was a K for kingdom,
Mhm.
and around the K was a circular rainbow.
Yes,
And it was a non-denominational church, but it was extremely diverse,
very.
Black and white, Hispanic, all types, all creeds, you know, were coming there to worship together.
Hmm.
And I guess that kind of uh, kept me from really seeing just how different and I guess how much tension was there. I don't know if that makes any sense in terms of.
Yeah. And I will say that in 84, things had kind of calmed down because my senior year was absolutely
Okay.
great.
Okay.
83 and 84. Yeah. It was the first
So the
part,
growing pains had already passed.
yeah, the worst had passed.
Okay. Okay.
But yeah, because our homecoming queens after that were, I think, all black after that. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And, and everybody kind of learned to get along. Even I had my white friends who were cool with black people. We dated black girls and stuff. And so, it wasn't, and I still remember the first white guy. I still remember the first white guy that ever dated a black girl. A guy named David Zahner, and
Okay.
he played basketball, and he dated a girl a year younger, Tawanda Lamar, and it was people lost their minds when they heard about that.
Wow.
I still remember everybody talking about that. And so but he was like the first guy, I guess, the first one to break the ice with that. And then by the time I became a senior, it wasn't as taboo, I guess you could say. Yeah,
was he originally from the area, or did he move in from somewhere else?
I believe he was originally there. I mean,
Okay.
he was 2 years ahead of me.
Okay. Okay.
But I mean, I always knew him to be there, and he had a older sister. So I think they were from the area. But
Okay. You said you moved from up north. Where
Cleveland.
exactly? Cleveland. Okay. All right.
Yeah,
cool.
I lived there. Cool. I was there for 8 years. Went to Catholic school, and then moved. Like I said, we moved to South DeKalb. But the Catholic school really wasn't up to par at the time. So,
gotcha.
And Bob Mathis had just opened, or it was their first year. I went there the first year in '75. So,
okay.
So it was convenient because literally the school, the playground was in my backyard adjoined the school playground, so I could literally, maybe 200 yards from my house, from my door to the school door. So
nice.
So it was convenient. So yeah, so I went there from 4th to 7th grade, and then.
Okay.
Of course, went to Southwest. So,
would you say that the administration at Southwest DeKalb High School at the time, how would you say they handled that transition from predominantly white to predominantly black? Did they change the administrators?
They did. We had, and I don't know what the catalyst was, or because we had a white principal, Dr. Oren, and he was there. I want to say through 10th grade. And then we had Dr. Miller, Dr. Eldridge Miller. And he was a great guy. I never really knew Dr. Oren, and I didn't know him to be good or bad or indifferent. But I knew Dr. Miller was very. I remember Dr. Miller would be out in the halls, saying hi to the kids and stuff. And very friendly, very personable. And so, he was. And I got along with him great.
When I got there in '84, they used to call Dr. Miller Killer Miller.
Really?
And I don't know what, maybe just because of the name, but
I don't know. I guess it depends on who you were, I guess.
Exactly. If you were a troublemaker, you probably did look at him that way.
Because he was strict. I'm not going to, but he was
right.
He was usually cool. I mean, he would, speak at the pep rallies.
Play basketball.
What's that?
Like they had a teacher-student game. And he was out there playing.
Yeah, and he refereed too. I remember there's a picture in my yearbook of him wearing his basketball referee outfit.
Okay.
Yeah, but he was a good guy.
Shout out to Dr. Miller. He was a good guy from what I remember when I first got there in '84.
Yeah.
Okay, so administrators were contributing to a smooth transition as much as they could.
Yeah, teachers were great. I mean, I never really. I don't remember there ever being an issue with the teachers choosing sides, or I guess if there were sides to choose, but no, it was mostly the students that had the issues.
Okay, all right. So relative to, I remember there being challenges with other high schools that we would play, such as Stone Mountain and Tucker.
Yeah, Stone Mountain was one.
Yeah, we used to really have trouble with them in terms of, I mean, we didn't have trouble with them at all in terms of the game, but in terms of the things that they would say, it seemed to be racism was very prevalent over there, and the players didn't mind bringing it onto the field. Did you experience that? Because you played soccer as well, right?
I played soccer. Yeah, I was
Mhm.
I was a goalie in soccer, and then I was a starting kicker my senior year for football.
Okay.
Um, Now I heard stories, from the players out in the field,
Mhm.
who played line or whatnot, and yeah, they were. We call Stone Mountain KKK High because
Yeah.
they had no problem using the N word while we were playing against them. I mean, I heard the
Uh-huh.
stories, and so all the players, both white and black football players, we affectionately called them KKK High because
Mhm. Mhm.
they were kind of notorious for that. That was probably the only school that I knew that it was kind of a race thing
Mhm.
because by that time Redan had kind of transitioned mostly,
Right.
and the other and like the northern schools, Dunwoody and I can't remember what else, but yeah, we didn't really have too many issues with them. At least when I played soccer, it was we didn't really have any kind of
Okay.
issues playing.
Okay. All right. Um, and so I feel like we should continue talking more about this
Oh
because
yeah,
it's such an important topic. I just don't want to get too excited and jump ahead to the photography, but
right.
but was Mr. Acree, were there any, well, here's what I wanted to talk about. I want to mention.
Yeah, I'll talk about Mr. Aker. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh
Go
yeah.
ahead.
No, he was a great teacher because he was actually my eighth grade soccer coach.
Oh wow, okay.
We even until our senior year, even though he only coached I think 1 or 2 years,
Hmm.
we called him Coach Avery.
Oh, okay, okay. I used to walk by his house every morning and sometimes you
Yeah, he
see
lived
him
right off
walking to
Boyne Road.
school. Hmm.
Actually, we went to his house one time
Okay.
because
Yeah.
he had an amazing train collection. He
Oh
had his
wow.
whole basement was just trains everywhere.
Wow.
So he took the whole class. He took his whole physics class over to look at his trains. We walked through the woods
Yes, yes.
um, and over to his house because you could go through the trails and get to his house. And
I mean,
so
it's
because he
literally
used to
like
actually go
50
for it.
yards away
Yeah, it
from the
wasn't far at
school.
all.
Not at all.
Yeah. So
Hmm.
he was a really interesting guy. And so it was funny because we would have our class would be right before lunch. So we'd get to his class like 10 minutes before lunchtime. So we
Hmm.
wouldn't do it. So we would all sit in there and discuss how we going to get, because he was easy to get off topic. So we didn't talk about stories or whatever.
uh,
But the funny thing was, he'd always tie it back to physics. He would say,
oh, he knew what you were
he
doing.
goes, hey, it's physics, And so, but we always tried to distract him and stuff. And then
Hmm.
the funny thing was, and I hate to say it, I didn't learn any physics when we were there. He used to do like, because we'd always distract him. He'd tell different stories and he'd do some experiments and stuff.
Right.
And then at the end of the year, when we go to, when we hand in our test, he would ask you, what grade do you think you deserve? And I didn't feel like I earned an A,
Uh-huh.
but I never wanted to give myself a C or lower.
Uh-huh.
So I always say B. And I got straight B's all 3 quarters in his physics class because that's the grade I suggested. But he
Oh
was a
man.
great guy. He was like I say, he would always then refer back to his days coaching soccer because it was me and a couple other players from when we played eighth grade in the class.
Hmm.
So he'd always make reference to it and stuff. So, but he was a great guy.
I don't think we mentioned this, but for our listeners and our viewers, Mr. Acree was a white person.
Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah.
My experience with Mr. Acree, I was in class one day looking sad, and he asked me, not his class. I don't think I wasn't smart enough to take physics at the time, but
I
he
don't think I would either.
he looked at me. I think I was in Mr. Prince's chemistry class.
Okay.
And he came over and he said, "What's wrong with you?" And I told him I was upset because I didn't get, I think I wasn't going to get the diploma or something like that I wanted. Um, and he went right to the office, spoke to the counselor, got my grades, and came back and was like, "But here's why you didn't get this particular
Oh, wow.
level." And it was. I really appreciated the fact that he would take time.
Yeah.
That he took his time to, number one, check on me, and number two, actually do something about it. Uh, Unfortunately, you know, I think that's a tribute to when you have teachers that live in your community
That is true.
and they're a part of your community, because sometimes you have teachers that are coming from different places
Mm-hmm.
and they just,
Insulated from
yeah,
the
they may
stuff
not
that
relate the same, or the culture is a little different. There's
Right.
some understanding. There's some value in having teachers and police officers and other public service people living in the community.
Absolutely.
Well, let's talk about black and white and the changes. I remember the different players that we had coming up. I know my junior. Well, the players that come to mind is Steve Corcoran.
Yes, I remember Steve. I was good friends with Steve.
David Wiki.
I was good friends with him too. David Hensley.
David Hensley. Oh man. Yeah, and Mike Fisher.
Mike Fisher. Yeah,
Mike Fisher was a good dude. And I didn't really know the differences. I kind of thought that. What's the best way to put this? So, I have a very good understanding today of identity, and I also have a very clear understanding of people being formed by the environments that they grow up in.
right.
And that's not just the schools that they go to, but that's the households that they come from. And I think one of the things that makes Southwest DeKalb so special is because outside of what you mentioned in 82 and 83, it's been, there have been good, I don't remember anyone being targeted or bullied or ostracized because they were a different color.
Oh yeah, for lack of a better term, I guess we went through growing pains. And when you're in the South in the 70s and early 80s, you got to understand who their parents were and what era they grew up in. With the civil rights or even before then, where racism was prevalent, and it was so they learned a lot of the values from their parents who didn't know any better, or the kids, and so there's going because you only hear things, you never, so you go off of stereotypes and whatnot, and so when blacks started coming into Southwest DeKalb, it was automatically the stereotypes come into your mind, and people have a problem. Some people had a problem with it. Those were the and those people left, and so. And with like anything over time, people evolve, and the ones that stayed are the ones that didn't have a problem, or just whatever, or maybe they did, but learn to adapt and say, you know what, this is, it's the best way to learn about somebody is to get to know somebody, and if you don't take the time to learn or spend time with people, you just go off of stereotypes,
right?
Because you'll find that, this person's actually pretty cool. He's not like what I was, what I grew up learning. And so I think a lot of kids who stayed at Southwest DeKalb, the white kids, got to learn, they're pretty cool, and it was great. And we had, like I said, you got there when things started to get a lot better. And the white people you mentioned were all part of my circle of friends who I kind of hung around with, because we all had, we all got along with everybody, and honestly, a lot of us kind of bonded together because our parents weren't always 100% cool with us dating somebody outside of our race. So that part was like, what, we had like a little bond because it was still kind of taboo for us to date outside your race. And so, and so we had that little, I guess, click or connection, whatever. So, so we started getting into hip hop and started going to some of the parties, and, and we'd hang around, different black kids and stuff. And so, so that's kind of how things have kind of evolved. And you got to see a lot more of the better part of the transition, so, yeah. I mean, and it's clarified too, it wasn't all bad,
Right.
82, but there were issues, like say homecoming, so yeah, it wasn't, like I say, completely bad, but there was some growing pains, and and the ones that, like I say, the ones that didn't like it left, and the ones who stayed, learned to adapt. So
right. It makes me think about there used to be a Facebook page for Southwest DeKalb alumni, that had gotten really huge. And it was always nice to see the people who went to Southwest DeKalb High School when it was on Candler Road
Yes.
joining and sharing photographs.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
and I think we've even had, I think Danny, when he was on the show, he mentioned that we had some guys, some people from back then who came to the festival.
They did. Yeah, it was neat just to see. I mean, people from the graduated from the 60s and 70s,
Hmm.
showing up. Yeah, and I think there's one guy who shared like so many pictures and stories of, he's like a historian, I guess, for
Right.
Southwest DeKalb, how the
Right.
school opened up and how Panthersville got its name and
Right.
how we, and it's just, I mean, it was just really neat. I mean, just to hear all the real old history,
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
it's a lot of history, a lot of tradition. With
That's
the school.
right. That's right. Well, I mean, speaking of history and tradition, you have definitely been doing your part in capturing that. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your photography and how you got started in that?
Yeah, this goes back to 2005 when my son was born.
Okay.
I grew up with a camera in my face. My dad grew up with a camera in his face. So we got literally, my
Oh,
dad
wow.
has hundreds of pictures from when he was young,
Wow.
back in the 40s and 50s. I've got thousands of pictures. We got home movies from back when I was little.
Hmm.
So it was just natural that I'd have a camera too. And I wanted to capture all the moments with my son. And then eventually when I had my daughter. So I got a nice Canon Rebel XTI camera. So it kind of looks like a professional camera. So,
Hmm.
and I carried it everywhere I went. And so people always joked with me, if I didn't have my camera or I did, so there you are with your camera. And so,
Hmm.
because I didn't want to miss any moments. And so, but it was just basically just to capture the family.
Right.
And people started asking me, "Hey, can you come shoot this? Can you shoot this?" And I'd do it for free, or I'd do it for maybe $20 or $30 or something. And so it just kind of grew. And so where it became, I guess, a little more serious is 2011. That's when Southwest DeKalb had their first, I guess, official alumni picnic over at Wade Walker Park.
Okay.
And I just showed up with my camera. It's the same camera I've had for 6 years.
Okay.
And I said, you know what? I'm still here to take pictures and post them on Facebook. And, now it's going to be it. And then people started sending me friend requests because, that's how you could tag your pictures if you weren't a friend. So anyway, so I got more friends. And then, and so next thing I know, people are asking me, hey, can you come shoot this? Alumni started asking me this. And I think the first one was class of 87. Had me do their 25th class reunion. So it was 2012.
Okay.
Had hired me for 3 days for like 11 hours, and I made some really good money. And I was like,
Nice.
so it was just, it became like a big thing for me to, and so, but I remember I did the alumni picnic in 2012. I think it was over at Rock Chapel, YMCA, whatever, out in Lithonia.
Hmm.
I think that's the one Steve Davenport put on.
Okay. Yeah.
But I was doing it for free. It was just a means of, I just wanted to capture the pictures. I wasn't trying to advertise or whatever, but but that's what happens. People start to recognize me as being the photographer. So then, like I said, I started getting more work from people. Now I started shooting weddings.
Right.
And the funny thing was, there's two students. I'm not going to mention their names, but two alumni who I shot their wedding. They got divorced, and I shot their second wedding. So it's just kind of interesting that those things happen. But I was shooting class reunions. Then I started doing portrait sessions. And their parents had their 50th wedding anniversary, and so it just kind of blossomed. And to this day, I have yet to advertise at all. And I'm shooting every week now, and
Nice.
if not, having to turn stuff down.
Nice.
Just because it grows exponentially, and and you kind of get a reputation. So, but when Danny took over everything is when I started getting paid to, he asked me, he's how paid to come do it, because it got to be, we all know how big it got. It's easy when you got 100, 200 people showing up. I can just walk around and take pictures and not a lot of work. But when you've got 2,000 people, it's it's not that I don't mind doing it, but it's a lot of work.
That's a lot of work, a lot of steps.
And I do it honestly. really below cost. I just
Mhm.
we stuck with the same, I think $250 for me to shoot for 4 or 5 hours, which is way under what I charge now for event of that size. So, but I love it. I mean, it's just, and he asks me every year. He goes,
Yeah.
"Hey Chris," he goes, "I know." He said, "I know you're a photographer, but you sure you want to do it and just not hang out with your class?" And I'm like, "Look, Danny," I said, "This is the best way for me to get around and take
Right.
pictures with everybody, because I've become friends with people who graduated 20 years after me, and
Mhm.
we've never." Like I said, I recently did the 2004 stuff, their 20-year reunion.
Okay.
And so, but it's just, I've gotten to know people and become friends through Facebook, and I see them in public. And the funny thing is, people laugh, but everybody knows me. It's like anywhere I go, anywhere in downtown, anywhere in Atlanta, I run into people. "Chris, what's up?" And I've got close to 5,000 friends on Facebook, and probably 80% of them are alumni.
Nice.
And so I can't keep up with people's names. I mean, I recognize faces, but and so, and I hate the fact that I can't remember everybody's name, but that's just the reality of when you
Right.
when you come into contact with so many people. But it's nice to feel, I guess, to feel appreciated. And so a lot of people know me, and I'll have people, strangers, like see me and like, "Oh, you shot so and so's last meeting, or their
Yeah.
pictures," and it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, I remember you. And so it's like people who are friends, and so
Uh-huh.
it's just kind of, it's slowly evolving. And then, like I said, now, I mean, everything I did, yesterday I shot a alumni. I can't remember what year he is. I shot he and his wife's 30th wedding anniversary
Nice.
celebration.
Good
So
stuff.
yeah, so I'm always so it's kind of, that's where I kind of stuck with the whole, become a huge, I realize our alumni is much different
Uh-huh.
than everybody else's alumni, because
Big time.
it's we're all family.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
For
and
sure. For sure.
so it's but yeah, I thoroughly enjoy it, and
Mhm.
and looking forward. I'm going to be there this year for the alumni picnics or the alumni fest. So
Nice.
it's fun.
Nice. All right. And so that is excellent, because I wasn't sure if you got started shooting for the yearbook while in high school, but I think that's so dope that your dad has pictures from when he was a kid, and you do the same.
Oh, yeah.
And you're carrying on that tradition. And
Yes.
and congratulations, because one of your children is now at University of Southern California. Is that correct?
That's correct. He is which is so hard to believe. He's getting ready to be a junior. He's halfway through college.
Wow.
He's at Southern Cal. I'm so proud of him. He's on a full academic scholarship. I mean, he literally,
Wow.
he's not having to, he got $320,000 for the school.
Nice.
Yeah. And it was so great. I mean, he's such a self-sufficient kid. He did his senior year. He didn't tell anybody. He was applying to all these different colleges,
Yeah.
paying out of pocket for the application fees. And he
Wow.
applied to like 10 different schools, and he got over $1 million in scholarship offers.
Wow.
I mean, the big schools like DePaul,
Mhm.
Howard, Catholic universities, American, George Washington. I mean, nice schools. And so, but he chose Southern Cal because they had all the programs he wanted.
Okay.
And they I wouldn't say they gave him much money, but they really, really wanted him there.
Yeah.
And he's doing extremely well. He's just finished up his 4th semester there, and he's made the dean's list 4 semesters in a row.
Sweet.
He's a behavioral economics major, and he's carrying almost a 3.8 or 3.9 GPA.
Wow.
Yeah. And he's busy. He's an officer. He works with he's an officer in the local NAACP chapter there.
Okay.
He works in the with the homeless community, goes out once a month, gets water. He sings in the choir there. He's God, what else does he do? He's so busy. I'm like, where do you have time? And you still make grades, and he still has a full-time social life. Oh, and he's put out 2 albums now.
What?
Yeah, he's doing it for fun. He says
That's fantastic.
Yeah, he's got 2 albums now on, you can go on Spotify or Apple Music. Stuff. It's just something he writes all the lyrics, he does the music.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so he's fully enjoying at that age. And I told him, I'm like, enjoy yourself. I said, because honestly, when you get to be older and get to be our age, you're gonna miss those times. As I said, so maximize that time. Have as much fun as you can. And of course, focus on your and he's doing it all.
That's great. That's fantastic. I mean, adulting is overrated for real.
It really is. It really is. If I could go back and I'd do it all over again.
What would you attribute his scholarly success to? Starting off when he was in kindergarten, how'd you?
Oh, well, see,
here's
he's since birth. I was, I had the rare privilege of being a stay-at-home dad.
Okay.
It's something that my now ex-wife, whatever, we decided to be one of us to stay home and take care of the kids, and so it made sense for me to stay home, and so I got to see it all. I mean, he's from birth. I mean, he was always been determined. As from learning to crawl to standing up to walking to talking. I mean, he was a perfectionist, and but he would keep doing things over and over until he could do it, and he's always had that drive, and I don't know where he gets it from, because my dad is very driven. I'm not. I'm kind of, and I hate to say it. I mean, and things come naturally for me, but I don't have the drive, and so, and I honestly say, I didn't apply myself as much. My parents were high school educated, so by the time I got to high school, they could no longer teach me anything or help me with anything. So I was kind of left on my own. As long as I brought home A's and B's, they were fine.
Right.
And then get to college, and I'm like a fish out of water. I don't know how to study. I don't know, and it caught up to me. But anyways, I kind of digress a little bit. But he's always been that kid, and and even like I say, he did everything on his own to get into college. We didn't have to help at all. We didn't have to submit anything to get grants or scholarships. He did everything by himself, and all this while doing like 100 things in high school. And so, so he's always been that kid, and he's and honestly, his best quality outside of all that is he's the kindest person you'll ever meet. He can't do enough for people. He's very empathetic, very, helpful with people. I mean, he can't do enough. And so that's his best quality. And just the fact that he's doing well in school and doing, a lot of service for the community and stuff. It's just icing on the cake.
That's fantastic. That is fantastic. Would you say that the lessons you learned transitioning from high school to college and figuring things out that, you just mentioned, not knowing how to study and things like that. I mean, that happens a lot. That actually happened to me as well. Getting to college, having never studied in my life. And unfortunately, I didn't really do a whole lot of studying while I was at Georgia Tech, but that's another story altogether. Would you say that your lessons learned contributed in any way to his development as a student?
Absolutely. Well, there's a lot of lessons learned, and it's a lot of things, that I didn't want him to go through that I had to go through. Okay. I had a soccer scholarship after high school. It was a small college down in Savannah, Armstrong State. So it was a full scholarship, everything paid. And I get down there, there's 5 other guys from Atlanta. And it was, some really good soccer players. And we lived in apartments. They were still building the dorm. So 3 of us in one apartment upstairs, 3 in another downstairs. Well, when you go from having your parents tell you when to study, when to go to class or go to school and all that, it's a lot different when you're down there and nobody's telling you when to go to class, when to study. Yeah,
you're on your own.
And somebody was always doing something. There's always a party to go to.
Always.
And so, and I wasn't that kid. I wasn't disciplined at all. And so ended out failing one class. I had to drop another. Okay. And I had a coach who was very hands-off. He didn't, he was new to the whole scholarship. It was the first year they were offering scholarships. So he had no idea how to take care of the kids who were on scholarship, and it's not his fault. Because ultimately my responsibility, but I had 15 quarter hours transfer from high school. I took joint enrollment English. So I got college credit from Decatur College. So I'm thinking, 15 hours there. NCAA required 36 quarter hours to maintain eligibility. Well, I had 15 hours there plus the 32 hours that I ended up finishing with at Armstrong. It gave me 47 hours. Okay. So a week before I'm supposed to go back to school, that summer of '85, he calls me. He goes, "Hey, Chris." He goes, "I hope you're taking a class this summer." And I'm like, "No." I go, "Why, Eddie?" And he's like, he says, you don't have enough hours to keep your scholarship. And I'm like, yes, I do, Eddie. I got 47 hours. And he's like, no, NCAA says what you've done in the last year. So what transferred didn't count. So I only had 32 hours. But now my sister just graduated high school, and my dad didn't have a lot of money at the time, and he was having to pay for my sister to go to college. She went out going to West Georgia. So I'm now in a position of telling my dad, I don't have my scholarship. And so I try to think of a plan. I'm going to stay at home, work, save money, and I'll get my, go to DeKalb College, get my grades up, and then I'll go back the following year. So anyway, but I don't say anything to my dad because I'm scared to death to tell my dad, because my dad's really, he was really strict, but more so I didn't want to disappoint him.
Okay.
And so anyways, so finally, like 2 days before I'm supposed to go, he's like, son, he goes, why haven't you been packing or getting your stuff ready? And so that's when I sat down and had to talk with him. And I had to always fully explain I was going to work, I was going to go to DeKalb College and all this stuff, and that, or maybe I can go back to the school, Armstrong, but you'd have to pay for it, and I could practice with the team, but I couldn't play in the games, and I could get my scholarship back, and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So anyways, he looked at me and just said, he said, get in the car. Put me in his car, took me behind South DeKalb Mall. And we know what's behind South DeKalb Mall in the annex: Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. And he says, pick one. He goes, because you're not living here. So, and my dad's a man of his word. It wasn't an idle threat. And so ended up choosing the Air Force, and ended up spending 4 years in the Air Force. And best thing that could have happened to me, I met some great friends. I still have some close friends to this day from my time there. But it was a wake-up call, because I wasn't ready for college, and he wasn't ready for, he wasn't going to allow me to stay at home, and because that ends up becoming a permanent thing, and you end up not finishing anyways. But best thing that could have happened. So didn't want that for my kids. And so, and I had to look at the root of everything. Moving to the South, the public education system wasn't the best as far as college development, at least not for me. Okay. And so, and when you have parents who are high school educated who really can't see, my potential, not so much my potential, because I'm bringing home A's and B's, but they can't really offer me more, Right. So I wanted to make sure my kids had that. So my kids went to really good schools. We stayed on top of their studies all through it, and, make sure they were getting good grades and were good students, behave themselves. And so now, we've talked a lot about my son. He got his scholarship. I'm proud to say my daughter's finishing high school. She did online school, but she's finishing with a 3.9 GPA. She got a 31 on the ACT.
Wow.
So she's got her full Hope scholarship. So she's good to go as well. And so
that's excellent.
So that's excellent. So I wanted to make sure, that I set my kids up to be successful, and overcome some of the things that I saw were challenges, I guess, from me going through school, or things that I could have helped me, to success. So
that's fantastic. I mean, dude, thank you for sharing that, because number one, I want to commend you for utilizing what was a tough situation for you and turning it into guidance and a life lesson that could assist your children, making sure that they didn't go through the same thing. There are programs out here, and I used to work for one, and our focus was on populations that were low income, first generation, either or both. And there's so much that we don't know as first generation college students. We may do well academically in high school, but once we get to college, if our parents didn't go there, or if they're not aware that we need additional guidance, and what makes me think about this, Chris, is how players get scholarships to go to school, and then they get there, and you think that the same supporting system is in place. You think that you're going to be able to get guidance and assistance from counselors and coaches, and when coaches are promising your parents that they're going to take care of their student athlete like they would take care of their own,
Right.
And that's not it's not necessarily what happens. But kudos to you for turning those lemons from back in your day to lemon meringue pie for your
Right.
children today. That's
Yes.
fantastic. And shout out to your dad too for taking you behind South DeKalb Mall.
He,
And
he, he still talks about that. It's still, we talk that story all the time. It's and that's the one thing I'm proud, that I'm glad he's always been that person,
mhm.
I always, and to this day, I still have a fear of disappointing my dad. He's 84
Yeah.
years old, and
Mhm.
and it's always been, that's kind of been my, I don't say my motivator, but
Mhm.
I've always had to put my dad on a pedestal, and no, it's always been important that I, do what I can to make make him happy, but
Yeah.
disappoint him, and
Yeah. Yeah.
so he did what he had to do. My
That's right.
mom had the hardest time with it.
Mhm.
My first time calling home when I was in basic training, we got base lib or squadron lib. We got to call home for the first time,
Mhm.
and my mom answered the phone, and I started crying. My mom started crying, and she was like, and so my dad snatched the phone from her, and he said, "Son," he said, "you need to stop right now." He says, "You're not coming home." And so, and that was my kind of, okay, this is my moment. I had to grow up, and
Yeah.
after that, things was great, and
Yeah.
like I said, to this day, I have a bunch of friends I've met from the Air Force now who are still close friends, and grew up a lot, because one thing I'll say about the military, at least back then, for me, it was you had two things. If you're either going to make it in life,
Mhm.
or you weren't going to make it in life, and if you couldn't get
Okay.
through the Air Force through basic training and through everything, chances are life was going to be really difficult for you. And so
Okay.
it forced you to grow up. You didn't
Yeah.
have a choice.
Yeah.
And so, and I did. And, and then after that, life happened, and here I am, and so, two
Mhm.
amazing kids, and beautiful family. And so,
Yes, sir.
yeah.
Well done. How'd you decide on the Air Force?
Um, well, my dad was Navy. My dad spent 4 years in
Okay.
the Navy.
Okay.
He, and so when I went to the first place I checked when I went to the recruiters was the naval recruiter.
Okay.
I always wanted to be a meteorologist. That was always my goal from honestly from the
Interesting.
time I was 5 years old.
Okay.
Weather always fascinated me, and so that was my goal. And so checked Navy, and they didn't have any weather. Took a pretest for the ASVAB, and so with the
Mhm.
Navy, and I scored 100 on it. He's like, and the recruiter, he just like lost his mind. He's like, I've never had anybody get 100. He didn't want to put me in weather now. He's like, you should, go into nuclear engineering or whatever field that was.
Uh-huh.
He's like, you can make so much money getting out. And I'm like, that's not what I want to do. I want to do weather.
Right. Right.
So I checked with the Air Force. They had weather. And so
Okay.
ended out joining up with them, but they didn't have any openings in weather. But he said, but you can go open. So basically we'll put you on a list. And when it's time for you to go to basic training, 6 months down the road, whatever, we'll see if there's an opening for you. Well, I scored too high on the ASVAB to get into weather. Weather didn't require a high score. It was, and so, so I scored. I could put in context. Weather only required a 39 on the ASVAB to get in. Anybody can get a 39. I don't say anybody, but most anybody.
Right.
I got a 93. I got a 93 on it. So
Okay.
So they have a hard time filling the medical positions. Those are the highest. You had to score in the 70s to get in medical.
Mm-hmm.
So it became no longer my needs or my wants. It became Air Force needs.
Yes.
They put me in medical. And to be specific, it's called aerospace medicine, which is basically you work directly with pilots and air traffic controllers. And I had no idea what it was. But sent me to tech school, and I'm learning all this stuff. And I'm telling my mom this. My mom thinks I'm going to be a doctor. And I'm learning all this medical terminology and stuff. And
yeah.
But it was great because I ended up going to a Moody Air Force Base in South Georgia.
Okay.
An F-16. It was an F-4 base. They converted F-16. So it was really cool because I worked directly with fighter pilots, got to hear their stories, and actually got to fly in the back of an F-16 trainer model, which was incredible.
Yeah.
So sad I didn't get pictures taken of it. So it's just a story. But it's amazing what it could do. It's better than any roller coaster ride you could ever do.
I imagine. I bet.
But I met a lot of great people. I worked with some great doctors, great technicians, and then I met people outside the base, who didn't work in the hospital. So it was it was a great experience. Spent my whole full 4 years in South Georgia. Got to spend a month in Germany, 2.5 months in Saudi Arabia. So
Nice.
it was so I had some great experiences, and like
Good
I say,
stuff.
still good friends with quite a few from my time there.
Good stuff. Good stuff. So I'd like to tap back into your Southwest DeKalb archive.
Okay.
So tell us about your perspective on the rise of Southwest DeKalb High School football, and touching, that story may weave in with the rise of Southwest DeKalb High School's band.
Yes, because I know, like growing up, I mean, when I first moved into South DeKalb in '75, Southwest DeKalb, I wouldn't say the household name, but kids in the neighborhood, we all kind of knew about the tradition at Southwest DeKalb football, even football back then, because the coach at the time was Dewey Alverson. He was kind of notorious, whatever. He was a really good coach. He won a state in '72.
Right.
And they always put out, after that, always had really good competitive football teams. And so, so all the kids in the neighborhood would go to the football games. And then, the kids in the neighborhood, like when I was like in 6th and 7th grade, I had friends who were a couple years older. They'd go to the games, and they would, they'd tell me stories like, yeah, he's like, if you don't go to the games, teachers look at you funny on Monday, because they didn't see you at the game. It was just, so it was like a thing to do. Everybody went to the games. And, and then we played neighborhood football. We pretend like the quarterback at the time, a guy named Bob Berry, and I think you may have met Bob Berry. He's in the Hall of Fame, Southwest DeKalb Hall of Fame, but he was a quarterback in '78 and '79 on 78 football teams. And now going to Auburn or whatever. But
we met at the Hall of Fame induction.
Yeah, he was all state or whatever. But anyways, he was we played neighborhood football. Whoever was quarterback would say Bob Berry, and go back to Bob Berry and stuff. And so, so it was always, Southwest have always kind of had that tradition. But then it kind of, when we went, like I'd say, when they in '79 or in '80 and '81 or '79, Anyway, the football team kind of lost its luster. I remember Mike's great year. Southwest DeKalb had its first losing season like in 20 years. And it was, and marching band kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller because, because they were playing the traditional classic stuff, as the demographics changed, it got to a point literally where there was, I may be exaggerating, but honestly with drill corps and marching band and everything, there may have been 30 or 40 people in the whole band.
Wow.
It was crazy. It was like really small. And I was just like, and so.
And what year was this, would you say? Estimate?
82, 83.
Okay.
Probably 81, 82, because I played 83. The band had gotten a little bit better. They didn't really, the band I don't think really made the transition until 84, 85. I mean, the fall of 84, fall of 85, I think. But but honestly, everything. Coach Godfrey was the catalyst kind of for everything.
And he got there in 83.
Yeah, I was there. I still remember when they announced it because I'd always wanted to play football, but coach before him, Jack Miller, always, regardless of position you played, you had to play both ways. Even if you were a kicker, you had to learn to play defense and go through all the drills and stuff. And I didn't want to do that. I just wanted to kick football.
Right.
After player, I could kick a football, but I wasn't, aggressive like that. I didn't want to hit or anything. So, but I had determined regardless, I was going to play my senior year. You had to go through that. But anyways, I still remember the spring of '83 when this is like, say, towards the end of my junior year. Yeah. We came on and said, all returning football players, please report to the gym. So we all meet in the gym. And then here comes Coach Godfrey walking in his Towers jacket, and introduced himself and basically said, this is, we realized then we're going to get a new coach and this is what's going to happen and stuff. So that's where it all started. We didn't know what to expect. And so it was cool. So then, fall practice started. And I still remember me and Eric Jones walking out. There was another person walking with us. We're walking out of the locker room towards the field. First day, it's drizzling, raining outside. And somebody complained, man, I can't believe we're out here in the rain. And Eric Jones said, he says, you know what? He says, Redan High School's out here practicing in this because Redan was our competition. And so that kind of set the tone, like, you know what? Yeah, you could do it regardless. And so the great thing was Coach Godfrey did all he wanted us to do was kick. And I remember it was me and two other kickers, Eric Dunlap and Mike Woodside, all soccer players, and all seniors, and all were kickers. So all Coach Godfrey did, he didn't know anything about kicking.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we didn't have a kicking coach. So he would just have us go to the side and just say, y'all just go kick. And so we just take turns kicking field goals and all practice. And so we didn't do it. Coach Godfrey didn't have us doing any hitting drills or nothing. He just figured we just go kick. Well, specialists. But a lot of the players took offense to that because they said, well, they're not really part of the team because they're not doing any of the hitting drills and all that. So, so Coach Godfrey had to talk with us and say, look, he goes, I said, I'm going to have to incorporate, a lot of the people, whatever. So I'm like, okay, cool. So we had to do like the bull in the ring. I don't remember the different names.
No way.
Crab crawling. We had to do the pinery. We basically hit the bricks, basically go up against the school and hit the pads. We had to do
hit the building, hit the tree, pine trees.
He called it the pinery. We had to do Mr. Godfrey's neighborhood. So basically we go run the neighborhood, full pads, cleats, helmets on, everything, running through the neighborhood. We run a mile through the neighborhood.
Yes, sir.
And so we became a part of that. And so that part really was important because you get to feel like, no, okay, we're not really part of a team, and we got, and everybody kind of respected us. But But Coach Godfrey told me a lot later on because I didn't know how to kick. I knew how to kick a football, but nobody coached me on how to kick accurately and kick far and what's extra, things I can do in the weight room and stuff to become better. Right. So fast forward at his book signing, he had a book that came out, and I was a photographer there, and he told me, he said, you made me want to become a kicking coach. And if you look at some of the kickers he's turned out, he turned out some pros like, Rodney Williams and Cedric Oglesby and, and his son, ended up becoming all-American at Tennessee State or all-conference. But, he turned out a lot of great kickers came out.
Dave Hensley too was a good.
Dave Hensley
was a good kicker. He was a really good kicker.
Right. And so, and I'd always tell people, I wish I could have played with Coach Godfrey an extra year. And I think, because I didn't, by the time I got, end of the year, I was kicking 50, I could kick 50, 60-yard field goals. Wow. But before, beginning of the season, though, I started out horribly. I missed three of my first 7 extra points. I was 4-7. Couldn't kick it, barely getting 30-yard field goals. But then I got better and better as the year went on. Yeah. And I didn't have any real scholarship offers or, I was all county honorable mention, I guess, because I hit a 43-yard field goal against LaGrange in the state semifinals. So that's my claim to fame. Nice. But outside of that, I didn't have the experience with working with him. So, and he's always told me, he wished he could have got there sooner. But I turned him into a kicking coach, and so, like I say, he turned out a lot of great kickers. But
Buck always took that kicking game very seriously.
And I don't get it now. Yeah, because they don't focus on it anymore. And it's just, and you hate to see you lose by an extra point because you can't have a kicker that can kick an extra point. Yeah, that should be, I'd say automatic, but almost automatic. So, but that's
tell me a little bit more about the first meeting with Buck in that gym.
Just be honest with you, I don't remember all of the details. Okay. Basically he talked about his offense because he was big into the Delaware wing tee. Okay. Because Southwest DeKalb had always been a wishbone offense. Okay. Under Jack Miller, which is really, the fact that Steve Davenport's still in the top 20, I think, all time for receptions in the state or in the country. I can't remember, but the fact that his sophomore year and Eric's junior year, they were a wishbone offense. And I'm like, how? You got all this talent there and you're basically just running it every play and 3 yards in a cloud of dust. And I'm like, you had all this talent. So when coach, he came in the wing tee, it was a very, at the time, kind of unique. People didn't know how to, it took us a little moment to get everybody used to it because he didn't have a lot of time to get everybody, everybody's trying to switch gears from the wing tee to this. Right. So the first couple games were kind of a challenge, but after the fourth game, we started out 1-2-1. We were getting, and so after that fourth game where we tied, we had a week break. And so everybody's like, oh yeah, the down week, it's going to be pretty easy, because before, that was kind of get healed, relax, whatever. That was the hardest week we ever had because Coach Godfrey, I mean, we were practicing. I mean, he was killing us. We ended up winning 9 straight games after that.
Wow.
And we were beating everybody 30. I mean, we were scoring 20, 30, 40 points a game. You know, we scored one game, 50 points. I mean, it just kind of blossomed, you know, because nobody knew how to stop the wing T. And we had a really good defense too. And so I said if Coach Godfrey had gotten there the year before with that offense, because we had Eric Jones and still we had Cedric, Steve, Stanley Davenport,
Fred Jones.
And then Clemente was the backup, and I knew Clemente was going to be something because Clemente was our he was our punt team because when we practiced punt team,
he
would
throw
the ball 60 yards in the air, you know, to a high spiral, you know, bomb or whatever, and so that was because we didn't really have a punter that could punt the ball high in that far.
Wow.
And like we had all this talent, you know, and we had Jabber Brown, Michael Tanks, you know, all these guys were juniors and stuff. And
Gary
we had an extra year. Gary Campbell, and so
Henry Blades,
he was a sophomore. Yeah, we were so deep. I mean,
Eric
we
Wilson,
had
a lot of
Eric
great
Wilson,
players.
we had a lot of great players. And so he would honestly, I think if he'd have gotten there a year sooner, we would have won state in 83 and 84.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Just, you know, because we had that much talent, but we just didn't have enough time to get it up to speed or whatever. But yeah, the
best coaches I know from high school and even college, they are the guys that come in and they assess their talent and then they do their game plan and their offensive and defensive schemes, you know, without going completely, you know, left from what they're usually doing, but they try to tailor their schemes to what they have, and they don't just try to force players into schemes that don't work.
Right.
Yeah.
You cater to their. I mean, you basically adapt to their talents with the talent you have. Because
my junior year at Tech, man, we had the number 2 or number 3 ranked backfield in the country, and the coach there, it was his first year there, they decided they wanted to do some quick slant type offense. It was, it wasn't good. It wasn't good. But anyway, you know, shout out to the coaches who actually assess the talent that they have and develop their talent and their systems and their schemes based on what they have to work with. I mean, that's life. You know, that's what you're supposed to do with life. But anyway, you were about to say some more about Buck.
Oh yeah, and it's you know, the thing that kind of struck me, I guess, was the fact that how much he not only as a coach, but he was like a father to a lot of these players.
Yeah.
And to this day, I still don't know how he made it happen. I mean, I kind of do, but knowing him, but Columbia was our homecoming game, and so the week before, the week before homecoming game, some of the students decided to go and spray paint the school, Columbia High School, some of our football players. And they were smart enough to spray paint their numbers, their football jersey numbers on the school, which doesn't make sense. But I mean, we were young and dumb then. So it was a big deal. And somehow or another, they still got to play in the game that Friday. And I don't know how he did it, but that kind of clued me into.
Well, they didn't have cameras back then.
Right. So I guess it was hearsay and whatever he did.
Anyone could have painted those numbers.
Right. Exactly. But he stood up for his players, and then just later on, going to all the different things, tributes and whatnot for Coach Godfrey, just hearing the stories. I mean, this, how he was like the father to them, because a lot of the kids were players were from single parent homes and with their mom, and so he kind of they would come over there, have dinner with him, and or sometimes he would help them make sure he took a personal interest in them, and all those. It's this common story, and I think that's what made not only more important than being a good coach, he was a great person.
Yeah,
he's a great coach. He's a great person, even a greater person, and I think that really is why we're here having, part of the reason why you and I are here now having this conversation, because of the tradition he instilled or
Right.
brought in. And so, that's where the band comes in. And, and so now we got to have, good football teams got to have a good marching band. And so, I mean, the marching band became as famous as the football team, if not more, because they were nationwide, performing. And so, and then, then the track team became great. And so, and then basketball. I mean, so it was just a lot of different moving parts or whatever that basically, and I think it all started with him taking pride in the community, because you go to football games and there'd be people, I mean, they would sell out. And there's not that many parents,
Right.
you got people outside of the community coming to games that had no kids or no really vested interest in the high school other than, the fact that this is a community in their community and stuff. And so it was just, like I say, Southwest became a household name. And so, and that's very true. People kind of still, I mean, everybody knows Southwest DeKalb, even to this day. People I run into, people I work with, it's everybody knows Southwest DeKalb. So
that's all they talked about at Rainbow. I moved here in '84, and I had a month left in 7th grade. I got here in April of '84, and that's all anyone talked about was Southwest DeKalb High School football. Talking about how, how they were excited about playing for them, and Buck Godfrey and Chris. I will say that we were very fortunate that I'll speak for myself. I feel like I was very fortunate that his son Colin and I were in the same graduating class.
Okay.
Because he took a real interest in being there with the team. And that love and guidance that he would provide for his son, just kind of, we all got that as well.
Right.
And he spent so much time with us. We used to have camps where we'd be there at the school for a week, sleeping in the gym.
Oh, wow.
Doing 3-a-day practices. I mean, he was so creative, and he wasn't afraid to try new things.
Right.
Like that's how we ended up with the sand pit over there, building a sand pit, because that was his idea. I remember he was telling me, he said, I was watching this show, and he was saying that he was watching people running on the beach.
Okay.
And he said he noticed that all the guys from like Hawaii and things like that running on the beach, they had these developed calves. So he figured that if he created a sand pit, we could run in the sand pit, and that would make us stronger and faster runners. And I mean, we used to run people out the stadium because we were so quick and fast. And I think that was a direct result of that. And he used to have us jog from Southwest DeKalb High School on Kelly Chapel, and we used to have to run all the way up to Columbia Drive to that shopping center next to I-20.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, and so we would have to run there for aerobics class, and then we would have to run back.
Wow.
To the school.
Yeah, we just ran Leisure Woods.
Just like our winter workouts. Yeah, so so shout out to Buck for his contributions and bringing that tradition.
Absolutely.
And it sounds like Southwest DeKalb already had some tradition, but he was the right person to come in to build on that and add his own
bring it
touch
back
to it.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because it went, like I say, there was, I think the issue, kind of getting back to the race issue. Some people had their opinions of the previous coach, but they weren't. A lot of the black players weren't getting scholarships, and
okay.
And so that and you talked to a lot of the black players who played around that time. Usually, like the ones that graduated '82 and '83, yeah, they didn't get the scholarships they probably should have, and they had a lot of talent. And so,
wow.
I personally had a great relationship with the coach, but I think for obvious reasons, maybe. but yeah, it was there was need for a change, and the proof is in the pudding now. Here we are, and so that change needed to happen, and the fact the number of kids he put into college, the kids, people who didn't even start got scholarships. And it was just such an amazing thing. He. And I'm going to touch on a little something too. I don't know if you've ever read his book, My Best Friend, Eddie Robinson.
Eddie Robinson. No, I haven't.
It's a great book. I was at the book signing, bought the book, and anyways, read it, and it's just, you really get to find out how he became, or found out about the kind of person he was. And I'm not going to go too much detail, but basically, the year after I graduated, this was the like summer of '84.
Okay.
He went around with home movies. I mean, 8mm film, carried a projector and film. Tried to meet with whatever coaches he could because he was really trying to sell Fred Jones, Jabber Brown, and Clemente Gordon.
Okay.
And he went around and talked to a couple different coaches, and they kind of blew him off. Then he knew where Eddie Robinson was going to be one day here in Atlanta. I think it was here in Atlanta, but he got there like 2 hours early. KCB got there early, didn't want to miss him. Met Eddie Robinson. Eddie Robinson was very cordial, very open to all this. And anyways, they did, he watched the film. They all three ended up going to school there, and they developed a connection where he would go down there and watch their practices, observe Grambling's practices. Eddie Robinson would come up and stay with Coach Godfrey, and and he'd come watch his practices, and and they developed a serious friendship. I mean, they were just, then eventually they started a football camp down at Grambling, so he sent all the players down there. So it was just the whole dynamic. But the fact that there was nothing for him to gain other than prove his foot, but to get these kids into college, that was his concern, to make sure they got in to where he felt would be a great college opportunity for them. And it was a great opportunity for all three of them. But that was just the kind of person, he did this on his own, didn't get paid extra to do it. And there was nothing in it for him other than just to see these kids do well. And I think that was a testament as a person. But if you ever get a chance, and I'll tell this to anybody who's listening, get his book. Everybody kind of knows on the surface, what a great guy Coach Godfrey is, but you get really good detail of truly the kind of person that he is. So.
Definitely. I'm definitely going to do that. Buck always stressed education, and he didn't talk about it like it was a secondary responsibility. He was always emphasizing how important it was that we focused on our academics and graduating with our degrees. And I'm very grateful because he has helped a ton of people, like you said, a ton of athletes, and like you mentioned, even people who didn't start were getting scholarships because of the work that he would put in trying to get these athletes opportunities for scholarships. Now, what you did with that opportunity was really on you, but he definitely did what he needed to do to give you a chance to get yourself in a position to get a degree.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. So, but yeah, he, like I say, it's always amazing to go to the different events and hear all the stories. And like you look at the number of kids who put into college, how many got their bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, and just like you and some others got their doctor's degrees, and it's a testament, he's all, you would say he was solely responsible, but he had a big hand in that.
Oh, definitely had a big hand in it.
A lot of these kids, didn't have opportunities after high school to go to college.
Right.
And for some of them, football was the only way to get, to that opportunity, and he created those opportunities.
Yeah. I never understood, and maybe one day someone can explain it to me, why I hear stories all the time about guys that played for coaches in high school who would never give them their letters from colleges. Football programs from across the country would send letters of interest where they could kind of fill out a form and send it back, and they would be on that school's radar. And I heard about coaches who would retire, and then they would go into the coach's office and they would find hundreds of letters from colleges.
Oh wow.
And guys not going to school. It's really unbelievable that anyone would try to hinder the academic and personal and professional life progress of their players. And when I hear people say, well, those coaches, they did it because they didn't want their players to get the big head. Well, I think that's your problem. I think that's your issue. If anything, you should be using these letters and these inquiries from these schools as a motivating factor for these
Right.
athletes. Like, look, you have an opportunity. These schools, you're on their radar. You haven't made it yet. So stay humble and keep working hard. And you track and monitor that as a coach. But I just, there's got to be something really wrong with you as a person if you're a coach and your players are getting interest from letters of interest from schools, and you're not letting them know about that. And I think that today that probably still goes on. But I'm glad
Oh, yeah.
Buck wasn't that type of person.
No, he was just the opposite. He was, like I say, very proactive, and I think that may have been like I say, part of the reason he ended up at Southwest DeKalb.
Mm-hmm.
That may have been happening before. I don't understand that, and you can apply that in any field, but the fact that you have all these kids who are getting interest and all,
Right.
Why not help them out? Because it's a feather in your cap. Because you're the one who, basically, you're their head coach,
Mm-hmm.
and so you're getting. That's how you, like I say, you get credit for it or whatnot. But if you're not, you look at you and you've only put 3 kids in college where somebody else has put 10 or 15. But you have a better program. What's going on here? And so I think that's, I don't get that. I don't know if they just feel like, well, they don't want to be embarrassed if they don't do well, or they have a personal grudge, or it's like I said, it's something that we may never know. I don't know.
I know our junior year at Southwest, we were ranked 14th in the country as a program, and they were saying that we were ranked that high because our players, we actually contributed to the programs we went to. You have these schools that they win a lot of games, and then their players go places and they don't pan out.
Because there's more of a system.
Right. Yeah. And then, we had our challenges with some of the schools down south that didn't have 8 or 9 different schools in the same proximity.
Right.
They would be like the only 2 or 3 schools in a big community, big county.
That's a great example of that.
Exactly. And they come out there with 4 and 5 strings of good players, and they just wear you down. Whereas we had, can you imagine what kind of, as much success as Buck Godfrey and Southwest DeKalb High School had as a football program and even as a track program, can you imagine what that success would look like if we weren't competing with Columbia and Redan for Cedar Grove for talent? Yeah. And now they've added MLK and Arabia Mountain and Stevenson.
Yep.
And it's anyway, that's another show.
It's a challenge. Yeah. When you get a lot of your region, your territory or whatever cannibalized like that, it's just
exactly. Yeah.
really hard to stay competitive. And he did, because, he made it where people wanted to play football there. And so even outside, people would move into the community just so their kids could play football or play any sport or do band at Southwest DeKalb, because they knew if they lived in the Southwest, whatever, that their kids would probably have an opportunity to get a scholarship somewhere, whatever, track, football, basketball, band, whatever. Mm-hmm. So that, but like I say, when they keep opening schools, and they take away make you smaller, it make, no matter how good you are, it's just going to be a huge challenge.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's above my pay grade to understand why they do things like that. So.
Right.
Yeah. So, Chris, what would you say? The name of the podcast is the Big Play Podcast. Mm-hmm. What would you say was a big play for you, whether it was sports or life? I mean, I think you've mentioned a couple of things that are amazing, and so just asking that question to you directly, what would you say is one of the biggest plays in your life? And it doesn't have to necessarily be a happy story either. What do you think?
And when you say biggest play, are you speaking like a life event or
whatever you want to do? However you take that question, you answer it the way you wish.
And I will say there's been several, I guess, not say life-defining moments. I mean, obviously losing my scholarship in soccer was one. Mm-hmm. It was a huge catalyst in my life. Yeah. It changed basically my trajectory of because I was, and like when I was in college, this is 1984. I was a computer programming major. 1984. And so
Wow.
that was had I stuck with it, I wouldn't say it would be the next Bill Gates or whatever, but,
You might be Bill Gates.
but I missed out on an opportunity. I was taking these
Mhm.
programming language stuff and if I had stuck with it, who knows? When I got out of the Air Force in 1990, I went up to Southwest DeKalb Blue Gold game. Now, when I was in the Air Force, I played flag football, and I was really, in my mind at the time, I was going to try to go to walk on to Florida State because I wanted to go to school there because they had a great meteorology program. I'm still trying to get into meteorology.
Yeah.
So that was my goal because I had my GI Bill, and I figure, I could walk on, whatever, and then earn a scholarship in football. So when I played flag football in the Air Force, I learned some strength training exercises and stuff, and I was kicking 60, 65-yard field goals regularly warming up. So my leg strength, and I was very consistent. And so I'm like, you know what, this is my goal. And so after I got out of the Air Force, Southwest DeKalb had their blue gold game that spring of 1990. And I think it was Lewis Jackson. I can't remember who, but we were up on the field, halftime at the end. And so we go out there, me and him, I'm punting the ball up and down the field. And I had become a really good punter at that time. I could put a tight spiral on it, 50, 60 yards every time. And so I'm punting up and down the field. Well, after we're done, the game gets ready to start. Lewis, I think it was Lewis. But he comes over to me. He goes, "Hey, coach wants to talk to you." It was the head coach from North Carolina A&T.
Okay.
He came over and he goes, "Hey, I was watching you." And he's like, "What are your plans for the fall?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm kind of hoping to go to Florida State and all that." And he goes, "Well, we're looking for a punter." And he says, "I'm here to offer you a scholarship."
Wow.
He said to come be our punter. And I turned it down because I still had the dream I was going to walk on to Florida State, and Florida State at the time had issues with their kickers missing kicks and stuff, and so
wide right.
Yeah, and so I'm thinking that was my goal, and I'm like, I could have had a scholarship to North Carolina A&T, and so then the Great White Hope, or what you want to call me and stuff, and turned it down, and Florida State never worked out, and so missed out on an opportunity. But yeah, so, I always, and this gets to a whole bigger picture thing, everything I think, well, every decision you make throughout your life leads you to where you are at this point in life.
Right.
And I talk about this all the time. I could be a millionaire now had I stuck with my initial scholarship, or I could have had, a full, anyways, life would have been a lot different had these different things that were defining moments in my life.
Okay.
Were different. And so, I could have been rich and had all this stuff, but who knows? There's a good chance I wouldn't be as happy as I am right now. I have, a beautiful family. I have my 2 kids, and then plus my stepson from my marriage now. And so, I have 3 kids, beautiful wife, and I'm living comfortably, I can kind of do what I want. I have a great daytime job as a senior residential appraiser. I have my photography, and then I'm into doing my fitness stuff. And so life, very healthy. I still have my dad, great friends. And so, I tell people life could be better, but it could be a whole lot worse.
Right.
And every Thanksgiving, I remind myself, and then I sometimes share with people that, be thankful for what you have, because there's always somebody out there who wishes they could be you.
That's true.
And, regardless of their situation or regardless of your situation,
right.
somebody that wish they could be you. And so I always have to remind myself of that, that hindsight's 20/20, but it doesn't always necessarily mean your life would be better. It'd been different, but not necessarily better. So.
That's true. Very good. Very good. Excellent words of wisdom there, sir. Like, excellent words of wisdom. Well, 4th of July is on the way, and the Peachtree Road Race is something that is really big in Atlanta. And my guy, I have seen you participate in the Peachtree Road Race and some other things. Maybe triathlons and things like that.
Yeah,
and
I do.
So you mentioned your fitness thing. Won't you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, let me start back with my dad. I'm very big into fitness. I've done an Ironman. I've done a Spartan race. What's
the Ironman? Because some of us may not know.
It's a swim, bike, and run. Now there's triathlons, which is basically any distance swim, bike, and run. Ironman is a 2.4 mile swim. 112-mile bike, and then you run a marathon. And so I trained for and to rewind, go back maybe 4 years ago.
Okay.
I was 40 pounds heavier. I mean, I was still athletic. I mean, I still rode my bike, but I wasn't fit. I was healthy and somewhat fit, but a buddy of mine from Colorado, we were in the Air Force together, had challenged me. He lived out in Colorado. I hadn't seen him. I got him into running when we were in the Air Force. He became a really big ultra marathoner and Ironman, and so, but he had hurt himself, and so he was into cycling. And this 3 years ago, he invited me to come out to Colorado, or basically invited his friends to come do a race out there, and it was a 110-mile bike ride over 3 mountain passes, 2 at 11,000, 1 at 12,000 feet, and over 11,000 feet of climb. And so I was like, you know what? I haven't seen him in 30 years. I've never been to Colorado. Talked to my wife, and she's like, you need to do it. Okay. So I get out there 2 weeks early. I trained for it, got up my cycling, got up to about 250 miles a week cycling, and lost some weight. Got out there 2 weeks early, get acclimated to the altitude. So he lives in Boulder. And so I spent 2 weeks out there. We went hiking some 12 and 13,000 foot mountains. And so I got acclimated, did the ride, and had the best time ever. It was a hard thing to be done, but it was amazing. The view, took a lot of pictures, video stuff.
Oh, yes.
But it was a wonderful thing. And so I had lost 20 pounds at that point. And before that, I had knee issues. I have arthritis in both my knees.
Okay.
So I was on prescription anti-inflammatories, wearing knee brace and stuff. Well, after I lost the 20 pounds, did all the cycling, got off medication, no longer had to wear my knee brace, and most of the pain had gone away. So I was like, you know what? I've done a marathon before, because back 2016, I did a marathon.
Okay.
So I knew what a marathon felt like. I knew what it's like to bike 100 and some miles. Like, you know what? Let me do an Ironman. I've never done an Ironman before. So my dad had done one at age 70. And he was my inspiration. And so I said, let me train for this. So hardest thing I ever had to train for. So I trained, you have to train for about a year. And that involves, after work, going straight to the pool, swimming a mile or two, getting out of the pool, going for a bike ride or a run every day. Wow. And no breaks. And so I did that for a year. And so I will say I missed out a lot, because I'd come home from my swim before I got from my run or bike. Kids would be sitting down for dinner and stuff, and I'd have to go back out. And so a lot of things I missed out on because it was a second job.
Yes.
That's my daytime job. And so, but I thoroughly, as my dad says, it's not always about the destination, it's about the journey. And so you have to really like yourself to do this, because you spend a lot of time alone out there running. I did quite a few century rides, 100-mile plus bike rides out in Silver Club. So I'd be gone for 8 hours, 10 hours on the bike. I did a 150-mile bike ride into Alabama and back solo. And so that's a lot of time to have alone with yourself. So it was, so like I said, you really have to like yourself. But it was but it was an amazing journey. I lost another 20 pounds. My whole physique changed.
Wow.
I mean, I became real thin. I mean, I went from wearing extra large clothes. Now I was wearing medium shirts, and dropped from a 36 down to 32 in the waist. And so,
wow,
it was, and I wasn't eating any of that. Of course, I was probably eating more to maintain it.
Right.
But it was amazing. So I did the Chattanooga Ironman. And my swim was always a challenge, because I always have this innate fear I'm going to drown.
Okay.
And I'm a strong swimmer. And because it was swimming in the Tennessee River. And so the thing about it is, you're going to be in the water for about an hour. And it's either sink or swim, because you can't touch the bottom. There's no wall to hold on to, like a pool.
Wow.
So you have to figure it out. So I could do it. I mean, I swam 3 miles in a pool without stopping. So I knew I could do it, So anyways, I jumped in the water, and you jump in the water, and you come up out of the water. And as soon as I came up, I started hyperventilating. And I'm thinking, because it's just this irrational fear of drowning. And I've trained for this, and I'm thinking, but in my mind, I'm thinking, my race just started. I've trained for a year for this. It's going to end right here. But I figured it out. My dad had taught me. He said, you ever feel discomfort, or you feel unsure, stuff, whatever, just turn on your back and float. And just think about what you need to do. And that's what I did. I floated for about 30 seconds. I think, you can do this, just go with it. And so I turned around, started swimming, swam about 20 minutes faster than I had planned to swim. When I got to the finish, I was shocked. And so I was like,
Wow.
I can't be the finish. I'm like, I come out of the pool, and so there's video of me coming out. I'm pumping my fist when I come out of the water. Because once I got out of the water, I can bike all day and I can run all day.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to drown anymore. So anyway,
Right.
ended up biking. Now I did have it's kind of long story, but my shifter broke. And anyways, I ended up losing about an hour and a half out on the course on the bike. I couldn't pedal fast anymore. So I could only pedal, but I was in what's called a granny gear. So I could spin all day, but I couldn't get any power. So I lost about an hour and a half, which kind of took affected my run. And so still finished in 14 hours. And so I was, disappointed with that. And I told, my wife, when I finished, because she had my phone, and she was posting, I had posted before saying, hey, people were kind of following my training, and I posted the link, you could follow me on Ironman, you could track me and all this.
Right.
And she's like, when I finished, she was like, because I was so mad, I was frustrated with my bike and all this. And, she's like, babe, she's like, you're going to be so impressed when you go on your page. I literally had over 100 messages from people, direct messages from people on my page, wishing me luck and all this. Probably had 500 comments under total on all of them. And actually 2 girls who graduated, they were like 99, 2000. So anyways, didn't really know them, but they're Southwest DeKalb. And so they had actually had a watch party. And so they actually, on my page, they had the phone. It was the 2 girls and their mom. And it was Janice Coleman and Carol Coleman and their mom.
Yeah.
And they had a picture. They're holding their phone, and they did a selfie, and they're holding the phone with me coming through the finish.
Yes.
And I was just like, oh my God. I said, I don't really know these people. And, and I was like, that's just like, that's just warmed my heart so much, and that's touches back on the whole tradition thing, Southwest DeKalb. I mean,
right.
We're literally almost a generation apart.
Right.
And here you are, watching, taking the time. I mean, it's a 12-hour race, and you're taking the time to watch me finish swimming, biking, and running. And here you are, you're watching me come through the finish. And I just like, but it was just a lot of that. And just like, you know what? It made me really appreciate, everything I put into it, and appreciate, and a lot of it was mostly people from Southwest DeKalb, and I got other friends through my fitness groups and stuff. But it was just such a wonderful thing. And then my dad, and so it was just, it was so rewarding, and I just said, you know what, because I really, I mean, I never worked so hard in my life for a year, and I completely redefined my whole body, my physique, my whole, all my habits have changed, and they've stuck with me since then. So I haven't. But I had, when I was done, my parents were there, and I had my friends, some of my running buddy, a good friend of mine, there, helped me along, and my wife and my kids were there. And so when I was finished, I gave my dad a hug, and I said, Dad, it's because of you that I finished this, because my dad's always been like kind of my hero fitness wise. I mean, when I was real little, he was a bodybuilder, but he tore his cartilage back when he was in his late 30s, and his knee, doctor told him to take up running. So, which was probably the worst thing he could have told him, because he no longer he's bone on bone now.
Right.
So, but he told him to take up running to strengthen the leg. Well, my dad's always been driven. I mean, he's like, and that's an understatement, he's 100% everything.
Nice.
And so when he was a bodybuilder, then he got into his running. He became a really good runner, became captain of the Atlanta Track Club Masters team. Was on the board of directors, very competitive, but he was setting records in his age group. Winning. I mean, he had a trophy room in our house, and literally had hundreds of medals and trophies from all the different races. He finished one year, he got like top 150 in the Peachtree Road Race out of 25,000.
Wow.
So he was really fast, and he did his claim to fame. I think he did 3 or 4 marathons, and all of them under 3 hours. Yeah, he did a 2:46 marathon, which is like a 6-minute mile pace for 26 miles.
Ooh.
And he was in his early 40s. It was amazing. So he's always been, my hero. He'd go to his races, and I'd leave him a little note in the morning, when I was a teenager or whatever. Yeah. And I was always so proud of him. He'd come home and he'd show me his medals he won, and but all through life, and it all goes back to me, wanting to please him and all. So now, he still works out, 84 years old. We're doing a triathlon together this October down in Macon. So 84 years old. And so he's like excited. He calls me up now and talks about, you know, and it's so funny. When he talked about like the training he's doing, you know, I've lost 5 pounds and 84 years old. And it's like, he's not talking about his ailments or friends in the
Right.
past or whatever
Right.
things, whatever. He's talking about, yeah, I went out for a mile swim in the lake, you know, I lost 5 pounds, you know, and like when we were talking about the race, he had like, oh yeah, he said, I looked it up and, you know, in your age group, you know, this is your competition, you know, and I'm excited. I'm like 84 years old. And it's just like, you know, I say, here I am, I'll be 60 next year. And I'm just like, here I am, you know, almost 60, and my dad's 80 in his 80s. And we're having this conversation about health and fitness, you know.
Right. Right.
And he's still, you talk to him, he's still great sense of humor, still very vibrant, still travels, you know, still rides jet skis, you know, and stuff. And so he's like amazing, you know, and I'm like, he gives me, you know, encourages me to be healthy or keep myself healthy.
Yes.
You know, because it's all an investment, you know, and I learned this as well. You want your health span to equal your lifespan. So you don't want to be a burden. And so basically, I want to be healthy up until the day I die. As healthy as I can be.
That's right.
So,
that's right.
So that's part of my motivation as well.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
What's your dad's name?
George
Sharp.
George Sharp. Yes.
All right. Okay. Shout out to Big George, man.
Oh yeah.
That's dope.
Yeah.
That's so awesome.
That's my hero. He's always been my hero. From the time I was little, I got a picture of me when he was a bodybuilder making muscles when I was like 5 years old. You know, and then still, part of me still, you know, kind of wants to be like him, you know, as I get older. So
is he from Cleveland originally?
No, from Pennsylvania, from Western Pennsylvania. Johnstown to be specific. And then actually that's where I was born, and then moved to Cleveland when I was a year old. So Cleveland was like kind of growing up. I was there until I was 9 years old, and then moved to Atlanta, and then Georgia's been home ever since.
Okay. All right. Cool. Good stuff, man. Good stuff.
Yes, sir.
Chris Sharp Photography. What would you say is your because I see that you have kind of gone into and you may have already been doing this for some time, but I'm just now noticing it, going into photography of nature. What would you say is, you know, like your favorite Southwest DeKalb alumni photograph? Or if you have a favorite class that you like to photograph that's always fun and appreciative.
Class of 93.
93. Okay.
Yeah, I always tell them, because I did, and it kind of started, I did their 20-year reunion back in 2013. This is like really the moment that I realized I got to step up my game as a photographer.
Okay.
Because I remember they did the boat ride on Lake Lanier.
Okay.
And I rented a lens because and I was like, I got to have a good lens for this. So I rented a really expensive lens, you know, because I wanted to really be able to capture the moments and stuff. Okay. And, you know, Rashawn Ali, she was a class of 93.
Okay.
And I had such an amazing time because you know, I was, I think, hired for 2 hours. I can't remember how long it was. They extended the boat ride. They kept extending it because everybody was having so much fun. Yes. And I was having so much fun.
Yeah.
And so from that point on, I still, you know, they call themselves the 93rd Infantry or. Nice. And I've told them after I did that, I said, you know what? If I couldn't be a part of class of 84, I'd want to be class of 84. I still tell them that now when I see them. You know, I say, we're my favorite class. So, but no, they've always been wonderful. They always turn out for stuff, and they always, you know, very enthusiastic. So, and like I said, it all comes back to that boat ride because it was just such a wonderful story. And that's basically where I said, you know what? Okay, I started buying. Okay. In my photography and you know, get going with the higher quality stuff, and that's kind of made the difference. Was that event. So
wow, 93. All right, shout out class of 93.
Yeah.
All right. What about, you know, one of your favorite pictures? One of the favorite photographs that you've taken, or maybe one that was really surprisingly good that you know, anything unexpected?
Wow, there's so many. That's a good question. Trying to think of like a defining one. I know, like my niece, Brandy. I did a maternity shoot for her over at the grist mill over at Stone Mountain.
Okay.
And those pictures, she was pregnant as a maternity shoot,
Mm-hmm.
and it turned out so great. Because I mean, the lighting was great.
Mm-hmm.
Everything just came together on
Yeah.
that shoot. And it was just, and honestly, it was, I want to say it was a planned shoot, but it was something she had asked me to do. And what was really nice about it is her boyfriend at the time proposed to her, but she didn't know he was going to propose. So
At the shoot.
he arranged
Okay.
ahead of time.
Okay.
So, sorry, me causing the table to wobble. But he had arranged with me ahead of time. He's like, we're going to shoot, because he had his daughter. She's like 11 or 12, but
Okay.
her and him, and then, the three of them. And so we just did several shots, on the thing. Anyways, we're going, and he said, I'm going to propose to her. He said, but before I proposed to her, I was going to make the comment. I said, this is a really nice day to do a photo shoot.
Okay.
And that's how I knew. And so he said that. And so then he got down on his knee and proposed, and I captured all of it. I captured her. I was able to capture him on his knee expression, and then him saying, she said yes, and people didn't see, there was a few people there, maybe 20 people around there and all that. And so after he proposed, they all started clapping and stuff. So it was the whole experience, I think, was what made it great.
Yes.
But yeah, and so and the pictures turned out beautifully.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, but I've had quite a few, similar ones where just kind of things come together. You get the lighting right. And all.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's probably the most memorable one for me. So, and she ended up having a beautiful boy. He's, guys, I can't remember. He's like 4 or 5 now. So yeah, so it's just kind of neat to see, look back and now where she is now with him, and she's just had another kid. So, but yeah, that was probably my favorite.
Nice, good stuff, man. Good stuff. Well, what's you want to give us your website and Instagram,
it's easy.
things like
If
that?
you know my last name, it's very simple. It's sharpphotographer.com.
Okay.
I lucked out when I got that, because I got that maybe 10 years ago. Got that URL. But it's sharpphotographer.com. My Instagram is sharpphotographer, so it's easy to remember. I will say I don't do as much with my Instagram as I should utilize it as much. So some of the stuff, I have some stuff on there, but it's probably I need to add some stuff to it. But that's my most of my stuff I get through Facebook. I post a lot of my stuff on Facebook, and that's where I get a lot of my business referrals from. So just basically through Facebook, people just message me and stuff, or text me, whatever. But yeah, it's always neat because I don't advertise, and I just get random calls, or not random calls, but texts or messages. Say, hey, what you need a photographer and all this stuff. And so it's just amazing the people, because I've done like photo shoots for people I've never met.
Okay.
Because they're alumni, they know me, and so, or somebody, or it may not even be alumni, but somebody just gave me your name, and so referral. So it's great. I mean, like I say, it's just neat. Like I say, last night was great. I mean, I get a text this morning. Thank you so much for doing this. And I'm like, well, no, you hired me and paid me, so it's
right.
It's true. Thank you for hiring me. I'm always honored that people see it fit to ask me to come do their photos.
Yes.
So it's still kind of humbling, because I knew where I started from with my photography, and and I know now, I've gotten better with it, and then people still, people like to use me as a photographer,
Nice.
and refer me. And it's always kind of neat when I see people's profile pictures, with my watermark on it and stuff.
Yes, sir.
It's like, what? Yeah, it's cool, but yeah, anyways. That's
it. Man, Chris, I personally want to thank you for all that you've done in capturing these moments, because one of the things that can happen, people will miss out on their moment, and they won't enjoy the moment because they're so busy trying to take pictures, right? And I think that that's so important and valuable, that as alumni and and your clients, that we can rest assured that we can actually enjoy the moment and be in the moment and have a great time, and know that we're in good hands when it comes to the pictures that are going to be taken to capture the event. So that's thank you for that, and for doing a good job.
Thank you. Yeah, like I said, I thoroughly enjoy it. Like I say, Danny every year asks me, "You sure you don't want to just step back and enjoy the reunion instead?" And I'm like, "Look, like I enjoy going around meeting the people because it's not just I'm not always just taking pictures. I'll go. The one thing that I appreciate is pretty much every class knows me, and they always make sure I'm taking care of anything to drink, anything to eat. So
Yes,
well
sir.
fed, plenty of drinks, and so. I'm good, So and then I'll stop, and talk to some people for a while. I'm not just 100% time taking pictures. I
Right.
get time to interact. I still have my time to interact.
Right.
I still spend time with my class 84, but honestly, the whole school is my, they're all the alumni is pretty much my friends now, not just my classmates.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
but so like I said, Danny, like I said, long as I can walk and talk and hold a camera, I'm going to be here for
All right. Awesome. Good stuff, man. Good stuff.
Sure.
Well, hey,
Yeah,
man.
I'll tell you one thing. It was so funny last year.
Awesome. Let's go.
Last year, my wife, I think it was for my birthday, she got me tickets to go see Manchester United play Liverpool up in Columbia, South Carolina.
Okay.
At South Carolina Stadium. So, well, turned out it was the same day as our alumni picnic.
Okay.
So it was like, now mind you, I have only since 2011, I think I missed one. That was like 2013, I think I missed. But other than that, I've never missed an alumni picnic.
Okay.
And my wife knew. And this is the funny thing too. The alumni picnic is always the same weekend as my wife's birthday.
Okay.
Because it's usually the first Saturday in August is the alumni picnic. Her birthday is August 10th. So that was still kind of a point of contention. Well, this last year she got me tickets for the game for my birthday, but it's still her birthday. But anyways, she told me right away, because the game wasn't until like 7 or 8 o'clock, and it was like I can't remember how far of a drive. She just said, "Don't even think about going to your class early and leaving early." She's like, "You're missing it this year," and said, "You need to tell Danny that you're not going to be his photographer this year."
Okay.
And so that was hard. That was, I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed myself in the game. And once we got there, I wasn't thinking about missing the thing. But just like all weekends of the year, they both coincide here, we rarely go out, where I have to give up a Saturday or whatever. That happened to be the same one. So I had a great time at the game. So I said, well, next year, I'm not missing. So
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, so that was and Danny, I think he's had a son or something taking pictures, but but like I said, I missed it, so I'm looking forward to being back this year.
Awesome. Yeah, we gotta have that sharp photography going on, man.
Absolutely, I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Well, awesome, man. It's been good having you. Anything else that comes to mind that you want to share before we go?
Not really.
Any words of encouragement for the alumni, or?
I'm just gonna say this, as far as like taking time to spend time with friends and family. It's just a little piece of advice, because I had my 40th class reunion last year, and I still have very fond memories of high school. I mean, high school doesn't seem 40 years ago.
Right.
I can still remember a lot of the detailed friendships I had and things we did and all this. But also, it made me realize, to quantify it, 40 years from now, if we live that long, we're going to be 98 years old. And that's not a long time.
That's
and
right.
So it just makes me realize how short life really is. And I just want to, and I haven't done the best with friendships over the years. I honestly haven't done the best. I mean, because life happens and things happen. But going forward, I don't want to have regrets with not spending as much time with friends. And I just want to, touch on a friendship I had, a guy named Mike Woodside. And I think he was one of the kickers when I played.
Okay.
But Mike and I were always like really close. I mean, high school. I mean, basically all my great memories, most of my good memories from high school involved Mike. He played soccer, played football with me. We worked together at the same place. We went to like all these concerts back in the, early, all the different rock concerts back then. So, you saw us, we were on yearbook staff together. We kind of had the same curriculum. So we always had the same classes together. We were great friends. And then once we got, I got the Air Force and stuff, we lost contact. We really never regained contact until we got on Facebook. And then, even then, he was married and life was happening. And so, and his views had changed. He'd become kind of a Trump supporter, or not really a Trump supporter, but he was posting things and stuff. And so I found myself like arguing with him. And this was probably, 2019, 2020 and stuff.
Okay.
And so I kind of just said, I finally got to a point, I'm like, I'm not going to argue. This guy is my friend, but I don't want to deal with this Mike now. So I just,
Right.
So I basically, I didn't unfriend him, but I just unfollowed him.
Right.
And so basically I would never see his post.
Right.
Well, and then I would check on him from time to time. And then he had gotten sick, whatever. He had mentioned that he had, it was like around 2020, he got COVID or something. But he talked about he was in the hospital and stuff, but he never really led on and stuff. But I think I ended up discerning and stuff. He had come down, he had gotten cancer, but it was under control and whatnot. And so I'm like, okay, so I check out time to time. Well, he's back to posting the same stuff. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm just gonna let it go. Right. Then maybe a year later or so, I saw a message. His brother had posted that he had passed. And he had succumbed to cancer. And I felt so bad about that because we had, because and I will say before that, we had tried to reconnect. Right. Because we had a lot of the same interests. So it's like if a band would come in town, I'm like, I'd get tickets or I'd win tickets and say, hey, send a message. Hey, Mike, you and I got plans. And he would never respond. And so, and I wouldn't pursue it anymore. And I just, and so anyways, I didn't push it, our friendship or try to rekindle our friendship as hard as I should have. Okay. And then when I heard he had passed, I felt so bad. And now his mom and I were, his mom was like really active in our neighborhood. She was always like the neighborhood mom. We'd always hang out at her house, play video games and stuff. And so if somebody got in trouble, she was everybody's mom. Like if you got in trouble, she would vouch for you and get you out of trouble and stuff. So her name's Helen. So anyway, she's still around. And so after he had passed, I sent her a message and I just said, I really regret us, Mike and I, not making a better effort to rekindle our friendship. I said, because all of my great memories, most of my great memories from high school involved Mike. Wow. I said, and I regret that, wherever he was in his life politically or whatnot, I should have, put that aside and say, you know what, done better to try to just say, you know what, Mike, I'm coming by to see you, whatever, you like it or not, and so, but so with all that, I want to just basically tell people we're not getting any younger, and people are starting to, pass or what have you, or becoming ill and stuff. And so, and so that was my New Year's resolution, was to do better with my friendships this year. And it was actually from losing my mom, even though I had close to 58 years with her, still not enough time. And, and then, so it just made me realize, with the family I still have left and friends I still have, I got to do better because, tomorrow's never promised. And, so I've done better, but as I say, I'm always a work in progress. But anyway, I just share with people that, I think I posted this last week or something on my Facebook that, check on that friend that you haven't heard from in a while, because they may be going through something, or there may be a reason why you haven't talked to them in a while, something, a lot of times people aren't going to reach out and say they need help or whatever, and sometimes it's just maybe a simple hello and just, hey, I just check and see how you're doing. So I've got a couple friends I do that with now, just to say, hey, haven't heard from you about checking how you're doing. And so then they say, hey, I'm fine, whatever this, but they appreciate you just checking on them. And some people say, I've been dealing with this, or because you don't know. And so, as I get older, I start to appreciate those things, friendships and whatnot. So
yeah. That's some good words right there. Some good words. And my condolences about your mom, man, because you're saying you're turning 60 this year. Yes. And so it's recent.
Yes, it was last year. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it was a little over a year ago.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, but I will say, just a tribute to my mom. She had a great life. She got into running as well. She was an inspiration, but she was very quiet about it. And when I say quiet, she never really talked about it, or she had a lot of. I mean, she had about 100 medals and trophies too from all the races.
Wow. Okay.
Just that she never, was made a big deal about it. It was just something she did. And so, so when after going through her pictures, doing her memorial video and all, I didn't realize how much she had run and how many great friends she had and how happy she was doing all of this. So so that so that part too made me realize, what, I need to take more time to enjoy the friends that I still have and family that I still have. And so
Still
Yeah.
teaching you.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. What was her name?
Janet. Janet
Janet.
Shaw.
Janet Sharp. Okay.
Yeah.
And then was she? Where'd your dad meet her?
In Pennsylvania. There was
Pennsylvania. Okay.
yeah, they were young. It was 1963 when they met.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so funny. My mom remembers, she had a memory of an elephant. She remembered every single detail of what a bad date he was and stuff. And so, so it was just, it's a great story. They got married in 64. So they were married for close to 59 years. So, but yeah, and they had a, and just a little more tribute to my mom. She,
Yes, sir.
when I spoke at their 50th wedding anniversary, I was speaking about my mom and all the things she did as when we were growing up and all, and I said, my dad's always been the center of attention, where my mom's always kind of in the background, and she never really demanded attention or anything.
Right.
But she, when we were kids, my dad traveled a lot with his job, and she worked as well. But I said, we always had, our laundry was always done, always had food on the table. My sister and I both played soccer. And we had practices twice a week at two different places. We always got to our practices on time, got to our games on time.
Right.
And she did all of that, kept the house clean, laundry, food on the table. And she still worked a full-time job. And she did it all without ever once complaining or, and it's a lot of these things. So when I spoke on it at their 50th wedding anniversary, my mom, she came to me, she started giggling, and she was like, I didn't know I did all those things. And I'm like, you did. She's like, I just did it. It wasn't she didn't think it was a big deal. That's just what my mother was supposed to do.
Right.
But she did all those things. And like I said, I don't ever remember, like I said, ever felt like I was missing out on anything.
Yeah.
Even with my dad traveling all the time, the times he was home, we made sure we had quality time doing stuff together. So I had a great childhood. I had great parents. And so, and that, like I said, they were an inspiration for me on how to be a parent. And then, like I said, I learned, they were in their 20s and 30s when they raised me, and then in the 40s. So I learned a lot, of things I could do better for my kids.
Right.
Because I had a great childhood, but this is how I can make it better for my kids. And so
yes, sir.
I like to think I've done that, and they'll take stuff they've learned from me and pass that on to their kids. So, but yeah,
I'm sure they will.
Yeah.
All right, Chris Sharp.
Yep.
The one and only.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, man, it's been a pleasure and honor having you on. Thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you.
And thank you for everything that you do for us, as an alumni. So.
Oh yeah, it's my pleasure. Yeah, it's like I say, it's a I don't even call it a labor of love. Because I thoroughly enjoy just going around, let's say, taking pictures of everybody and just create memories. And it's like, now like looking back at 2011, that's the first one's 14 years ago. When it started.
Right.
And it's like, wow, it's already been 14 years. And when I started, it was like, well, high school's a long time ago. Now here we are 14 years later, still doing it, still having a great time. And but yeah, it's I enjoy it. Like I said, I couldn't think of a better high school to be a part of, and thoroughly enjoyed it. Like I say, this was an honor to sit here and talk about everything. I've got 1,000 more stories, so if you ever want to come back, revisit it, and
yes, sir,
or other topics to talk about, I'm here for it. So.
Awesome. Appreciate that. I'm gonna hold you to that too.
Absolutely.
All right, my man. Well, good stuff. Thank you again, man.
Oh, thank you, Marlon.
All right.
It was an honor
to
talk with you.
Yes, sir. Chris Sharp, ladies and gentlemen. All right.